ZumiLink is the hub for connecting you to the larger Air Force Academy graduate community. See how your fellow graduates are already gathering online to discuss, advise, and serve. Connect with graduates at all stages of life and start a conversation about careers, transition tips, and preparing for your future. And with ZumiLink now open to all current Academy cadets, the time for connecting to the graduate community is more important than ever. Sign up at zumilink.org and start connecting today. Brought to you by the Association of Graduates and the Air Force Academy Foundation.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Association of Graduates and Air Force Academy special presentation. My name is Bobby Wolf, and I'll be your host for this panel. Clearly super excited about welcoming fellow grads here, talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is Zoomies in finance and finding careers after active duty and wherever that may take you. For context, I graduated in 1999, later flew strategic airlift while on active duty. In 2009, I moved over to the reserves. I transitioned into my civilian career as investment banker via Harvard Business School. Today, I'm a director on the investment banking team at Houlihan Lokey, where I focus on strategic capital raising and M&A for some of the most innovative technology companies across cybersecurity and commerce enablement as we think about this new world where everything we do is online or omni-channel. This evening, I'll be joined by three panelists, and we'll have each of us will share a little bit about our personal journeys into finance and investment banking. First, let me introduce the other panelists one by one, and I'd ask that they provide a short introduction as well. The first one here is super excited to introduce JP Joyce from the class of 2008. JP?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm super excited to be here as well. I apologize to the crew in advance, but I have a little bit of background noise here. I'm at the airport because we're back to life as usual. I graduated in 2008, like Bobby said. I spent my freshman year or 4-degree year in Squadron 15 and then graduated from 9. I was a pretty mediocre cadet in terms of involvement in extracurricular activities. So maybe that'll be inspiring to some of you that you could still parlay that into a moderately successful career in investment banking. I studied foreign area studies in the Middle East while I was there, which hasn't necessarily come in handy in banking, but was very good for providing a well-rounded education. I was a KC-10 pilot for 10 years on active duty, 5 years at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey, and then 5 years at Travis Air Force Base in California. I did an MBA at Berkeley Haas while on active duty through the evening weekend program in my last couple of years on active duty. Transitioned to a small boutique investment bank called Vaquero for a couple of years, and I'm now at JP Morgan working in their tech coverage group as an associate. Did I miss anything, Bobby? I think I hit all the...
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I appreciate it. Yeah, let's keep the introductions going. We'll head over Ginny Galbraith, which is a class of 2013, I think.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Ginny Galbraith, class of 2013, like Bobby said. The Air Force Academy freshman year, I was in Squadron 24, and then I graduated from Squadron 27. Mediocre cadet 2, majored in management of all things, the best department out there. And then I commissioned as a financial management and cost analysis officer, served for 7 years. My first assignment was in England at Mildenhall for 2 years. Then I got picked up to go to grad school full-time at AFIT in Ohio. And then my last assignment in the Air Force was at Los Angeles Air Force Base. I went straight from the Air Force to investment banking in New York City. I'm currently at Bank of America and their Global Industrials Group as an investment banking associate.
That's great. Well, welcome. Certainly, we're glad to have you. And last but certainly the youngest of the trio, Everett Richardson, class of 2014.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Everett. I'm originally from Southern California and obviously graduated in 2014. And when I was on the Hill, I was in 4 as a freshman, graduated from 24. I guess on the mediocre theme, I was certainly a mediocre freshman in terms of all the memorization and military stuff that we had to do. But I think I definitely picked up the slack over the rest of my time, and I was very involved, particularly on the debate team. So that was definitely the highlight of my academy experience. And what else? I majored in philosophy and minored in religious studies, and I graduated as an acquisitions officer and did all of my active duty time in Los Angeles. I did 1 deployment to Afghanistan, and had a great experience. Loved my time in the Air Force. Got out at the end of my commitment. Went to Wharton. Got my MBA, and now I'm at Goldman Sachs as an investment banker. Also covering industrials. So I'm in the industrials group.
Got it. Well, thanks, Everett. What I would like to take a second and pause here and reflect on the how humble folks are from our beloved institution. We sometimes have to remember that a quote unquote mediocre cadet was quite possibly a valedictorian in their high school and a leader among others. And so, hats off to you and that's, a great trait, frankly, that has translated well, I think, for a number of our fellow alums throughout all of their careers. As we if we can be successful in this conversation, I think we'd like to get a couple of things out there. And maybe one of them is just, what is investment banking? What does that mean? What do you do on a daily basis? And we can ultimately get to a few of those points, but let's start out with that most important one, which is, how do you define investment banking, and how does that connect to the broader ecosystem around finance and business? Maybe we'll start out with JP.
Okay, so how do I define investment banking? JP, sorry.
Yeah, it sounds like you have an answer ready to go. I'm going to try to happen. So why don't you go first?
No, it's all you. Go for it.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is my definition has changed pretty considerably over the past couple of years. So I mentioned that I was at a small boutique originally that I joined in March of 2019 that was focused exclusively on what we call sell-side M&A, sell-side mergers and acquisitions, which was effectively taking software companies that were generally led by the founder, so relatively nascent in their development and business journey, and acting as the lay term I usually use is acting as basically a real estate agent or a broker for that company, and going out and trying to find a buyer or an investor to bring on board to try to sort of institutionalize the business, get some liquidity out, some return out for the founder and the employees, and then hopefully continue to grow and develop the business. The evolution, obviously, is that there's a lot of other product sets within investment banking. So I think probably more broadly, I would define it as acting as an intermediary between people that need capital, that need money, and those that have capital and money to deploy whatever that looks like, either in the first example I gave as outright sales and purchases of entire businesses, or through debt or equity, meaning partial ownership. So maybe not the most exciting definition, but that's the way I've come to understand it. And I'm nervous to go first because I think I'm going to get educated on what it actually is as we go through here.
Ginny, would love to hear your additions.
So how would I define investment banking? Like, it's capital markets, mergers and acquisitions, taking companies public, helping them issue bonds, issue stock when they need to raise capital. It's talking to CEOs, CFOs about their business strategy, how to grow their company, what the competitive landscape looks like. So we're pretty much like advisors to big corporations, sometimes family-owned businesses that want to be taken. Like right now, I'm working on an IPO where we're taking a family-owned trucking company public. So I work with some pretty small companies and then also huge companies like you've all heard of, like any big industrial company, all the big airlines, all the aerospace and defense companies. Those are all the companies that my group covers too.
Everett, anything else to add to that?
Only thing I would add, and I'm just putting myself in my like 20-year-old shoes, and just thinking about how I would have explained it to myself then. And I think that the big thing to me is just helping companies accomplish what usually is the most important event in their company history. And oftentimes it's something like going public or buying another company or something to that effect. But, in your own personal life, you might have a wedding, there's the birth of your child, your first child and other events, maybe a handful of other events like that stand out over the span of your life. So if you had to try to imagine what those events would be for anyone's business, those pivotal moments in that company's life tend to be what investment bankers are working on.
Can I add one thing? Because Everett made a great point. I think you've probably heard, if nothing else, that investment banking can be stressful and a lot of pressure. And I think it comes down to what Everett just said, in that what is maybe routine in our industry is indeed usually one of, if not the most transformative event in your client's history. And so to them, every engagement, rightfully so, is the most important engagement that's going on at the moment, and they expect to be treated as such. And I think that's critical to sort of understanding the lifestyle and the stakes that go along with the industry.
No, I love that, JP. Maybe that's a great segue into, what is it that you like about investment banking? What's exciting about it? What brought you to this industry? And then, is it a good industry for potential other graduates that would follow?
Yeah, I think it's just that, right? Which in a sentence would be the work you do matters, which I don't think is something that can be taken for granted anywhere. Along with doing work that matters is people expecting results out of you and work out of you that is of a high quality and high caliber. What attracted me to it originally, honestly, was I was more interested in technology as an industry than I was about investment banking. And I realized that I was never going to be sort of central or core to that industry. I wasn't going to be an engineer or a developer or anything along those lines. And so banking seemed like a cheat code to get involved in even higher, more strategic level decision making and engagements than I would have if I were at a particular company within that field, regardless of how big it was. So the rewards are high, I would say, in terms of the satisfaction that you get out of completing a task. I'll tell you that the reason I'm traveling today is I'm currently in New York, traveling back to San Francisco because we just launched an IPO this morning, went to the New York Stock Exchange, rang the bell, and the level of jubilation and relief on the part of the company and the 100 employees that are there is very palpable. And it's a good reset in terms of taking your nose away from the grindstone. And the good news is those happen relatively often, that you get that perspective.
I love it. And I couldn't agree more that this concept of helping founders and companies, go through some of their most transformative and exciting moments in that life cycle. Certainly that's what brought me to the ecosystem in the industry. Everett, you're the newest one into the industry, and JP mentioned, that nose to the grindstone. Could you maybe offer up the flip side of the career on the call it work-life balance front? And what should folks expect when they first jump in?
Well, I mean, I'm sure this isn't the party line, but I mean, just being honest, work-life balance is definitely not, I think, why you would go into investment banking. But I mean, I think that, so I say that on the one hand, but obviously on the other hand, I think that for me, I think deeper level, long-term work-life balance and what that really means to me, I think that investment banking is certainly a more efficient path, there than, 20 years from now, I think I'll have the flexibility, to maintain a really good lifestyle, but have the, the means to do it. And so in any case, I'm saying in the short term, I think work-life balance is certainly not the, the reason you go into investment banking. You work a lot of hours. As soon as this panel is over, I'll head right back to work, and I'll probably be there until, at least 11, but more likely well after midnight. And then be right back at work at 9:30 to do it all over again. So it's a lot of hours. I think generally the only day you have off is Saturdays. So in that respect, it reminds me a lot of being deployed, but so I mean, hopefully does that answer the question, Bobby?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I remember my early associate days with Morgan Stanley. It was 100+ hour work weeks were regular, but that to me was very akin to that deployed environment. And that's why I personally think former Air Force officers and academy grads just do so well in that environment. At 2, 3, I think I heard Ginny mention 4 a.m. and, earlier this week, you're able to function, you're able to keep going, you're able to provide and serve your clients at a level, to JP's point, is expected when they're going through something like an IPO or a transformative transaction. Now, but maybe that's a great, let's tie the next step here, which is all three of you, including myself, had to go through an MBA program in order to get into investment banking as career transitioners. Maybe Ginny, could you jump in with a little bit of that and start with, what is the career transformation from maybe started analyst, associate, and up, and how do you get into the first one? How do you get into the second? What's the difference between pre-MBA and post-MBA?
Yeah, so usually bankers start out as an analyst, which are straight from undergrad. They usually do a summer analyst program during their junior year of undergrad, and then they do 2 years as an analyst. Some stay on and get promoted to be associates. Some leave to go to different industries, to go private equity, all different types of jobs open up. And then I'm at the associate level, which is usually straight MBA grads. I was fortunate enough that I did my MBA while still active duty, and I went straight through some of the banks, such as Bank of America, have a veterans associate program. So they take about 3 or 4 transitioning veterans each year and give them shots at being a full-time IB associate without having to go through a full-time MBA program, which is the usual pipeline for recruiting. So I went through that route, but the associate class that I'm with in my group, we have about 8 people. 2 of them came as analysts, promoted to associate, myself, and then I think 5 or 6 MBA grads from all the top business schools. And then above me are vice presidents. So it takes about 3.5 years in my bank to promote to vice president. You stay there for about 3 more years, and then you are up for director. You either make it or you don't. It's kind of like the military. You promoted or pushed out. After director, you're up again at the 3-year mark for managing director, which is the top at the investment banking chain. So if you make it after 3 years, you get to be an MD. If not, you're kind of pushed out as well.
And throughout that progression, well, maybe you can tease out a little the next level. How are you compensated as an investment banker? Maybe I'll start out first just to kind of broadly explain how that works, and then you can speak to individual bankers and how they get compensated. But generally speaking, as a firm, if there's an engagement for an IPO, for example, which is initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. The way investment banks and advisors like us tend to get paid is a percentage of that transaction value. And in a $100 million IPO, that usually translates for the entire syndicate of underwriters. That's about 7% of the transaction. So to translate that into, there's typically 5 banks. They share those economics amongst themselves, and then that ties to the individual bankers who are working on the project. But that being said, there's different compensation depending on where you fit in the ecosystem. Ginny, could you just kind of tee that up on how is an associate compensated? How should you think about base salaries and bonuses, et cetera?
Should I give actual numbers? They're all like on Google anyway.
That's fine. Yeah.
So usually if you go into an associate position at a big bank on Wall Street, the starting salary is $175,000 now. You get a sign-on bonus anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000, and then you get a stub bonus in February after doing 6 months on the job of anywhere from like $35,000 to $50,000, depending on the bank. So you're looking at going straight from the military to investment banking, making $250,000 a year. I don't know what other jobs do that, and I'm very fortunate to have this job, definitely. But then after your first full year at the associate level, it's kind of like the military. You get a base salary increase. Everyone in your class gets it. So you're bumped up like $25K depending on the bank. And then this is where it really starts to get competitive. The very next year, when February comes, it's bonus season. You're ranked against all the other investment banking associates in the group, as well as in the bank. So you could get a bonus that's equal to your base salary, or you could get a $10,000 bonus saying, hey, you should leave. Investment banking's not for you. So you really have to compete, perform, find various people at the bank that will support you, get on good projects, and just go balls to the wall. Really, it's very competitive, and you will get rewarded very well if you're good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The way I've equated where you all today are, and to be fair, thinking through how humble it's all started, you're in the big leagues, and JP, if there's anything you could add to what it's like to be at a JP Morgan, and then add to those opportunities on the backside. If you decided to leave investment banking, what opportunities are there out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start by saying there's a lot, but if it's all right, I wanted to go back really quickly to the MBA point. And the thing I just wanted to say there is, like Ginny said, it's not 100% necessary to do an MBA or any master's for that matter, especially for veterans. There are programs to pull you in, but the thing I would lay out here is, and you may be picking up from some of the compensation that is pretty standard across the banks, and the time spent in each position is pretty standard, and the rank structure to equate it to the military is pretty standard. You may be seeing where I'm going with this, is that there is a template that the banks follow, both internally and through recruitment. And I think that it is difficult for many people within that world to widen the aperture and look at people that don't fit that template as closely as possible. And there's obviously some leeway given to people that are coming out of the military, as a bit of an asterisk, but I think the closer that you can align yourself to that and make yourself fit into the box that looks like the ideal candidate, the more success you'll have. I think an MBA goes a long way towards that. And for most post-MBA associates, it's a standard recruiting process, right? It's get an internship in the summer between your first and second year if you do a full-time program or a part-time program. Hopefully get a return offer, and whether you do or not, continue to recruit throughout your second year and try to get maybe an even better full-time offer if you didn't the first time around, or give yourself backup options. So I can't overstress that enough, that there's a path to follow, and I would encourage you to try to research that path if this is something that interests you, and start down it as early as possible. As far as exit opportunities go and what that looks like, Ginny sort of alluded to it on the analyst level, where I think there's more of a keen focus on the exit path, if you will, where it's sort of understood that analysts who generally come straight out of undergrad will have a more or less transactional relationship with the bank, wherein they dedicate their life for 2 years. And if you think the hours described for the associates are bad, the analysts are worse. Regardless of where the associate level moves, the analyst will move incrementally above that in terms of the hours worked, and they'll get a variety of exit opportunities. But since I think the associate level is probably more appropriate for the group here, I have not necessarily looked to move outside, but what I'll tell you is that if you have a JP Morgan or a Bank of America or a Goldman Sachs on your resume, or Morgan Stanley, like Bobby did when he was an associate, you're going to get a call back as long as the role you're applying to is somewhat relevant to the field you're in. I will tell you that upon the completion of any deal that we do, there's probably a 25% chance that we'll lose someone on the team to that client in some form of internal role, because they're always impressed by the work ethic and the aptitude. But there's numerous other paths to go as well. I would say for post-MBA associates, if you're early, private equity, venture capital are common exit paths, as is corporate development at larger companies, meaning that you work on strategy for them, and more specifically, oftentimes working on different mergers or purchases of businesses that they can make to help grow and expand their capabilities. But there's really no limit. I'll tell you that one of our biggest strengths in sourcing clients is the fact that we have ex-employees there that now work for them, either in corporate development or finance or strategy or some other role. So it would be hard to think of a better launching pad into sort of any other corporate career that you would want outside of investment banking, or maybe consulting would be the other natural extension of that. I'm sure I missed 100 different opportunities, Bobby, and everybody else. So feel free to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, maybe we'll take this over to Everett. Everett, you've got a few different kind of networks out there. How do you think about the career path that you've started down? Certainly, in case there's anyone from Goldman watching, I'm not going to ask you to commit to leaving or staying, certainly. But, two pieces to this is, what could you add to maybe JP's comment around opportunity and the opportunity set? And then, maybe tie that to, what has made you then thus far kind of successful in the way you think about your career?
I think in terms of opportunity, one of the things that I think enjoying the most about this experience is, for a long time, I think that you always heard, I think as a talented person in the Air Force, or, in business school, or just, in general, you certainly got a lot of input or reinforcement just around, based on your potential, people would be interested in having you join their organization, or would be sure that you could do certain things, or could learn certain things. And so there was just a lot of, I think in different ways we get that, this positive reinforcement or whatever around like our potential to do well. But after just spending a short amount of time in banking, it goes from being about your potential to, I think, having very quantifiable experiences where you see that the thing you're becoming competent at and actually good at is something that is so highly valued around the world, in every organization, every government, every company, almost without exception. I mean, whether it's a municipality or a tech startup or a train, builder in, some country on the other side of the globe, all of them have some use or need for the investment banking skill set. And throughout your experience, you encounter all of these various stakeholders, and you're like, wait, we work with this sovereign nation that, I couldn't have placed on a map, and we work with Google, and we work, and you realize that you're providing a service that is so valuable to them. Not only are they, happy to employ your services, but they're willing to pay you a lot of money to do what you do and to get your advice. And so ultimately, I mean, that to me has been, for me, it's been like a new level to the whole, okay, I'm talented, I can do a lot, or I have a lot of potential, but now it's like, wow, I mean, you can really quantify and put a dollar figure next to the day-to-day skill set, that I'm developing here. And so I've definitely enjoyed that. And so just, I guess to cap that off in terms of the question about exit opportunities, I think my thinking has certainly gone beyond, I could transition into private equity, or I could transition into a role in tech down the road, if that was something I wanted to do. But instead, more, I think now my mindset is at the point at which I don't want to do investment banking anymore. Whatever it is that I want to do next, I'm highly confident that I'll be able to do it. And so I'm very happy having paired my military experience with a career in investment banking.
I love it. And speaking of that military experience, I'd love to pull on that thread a little bit, and maybe head over to Ginny and say, hey, Ginny, part of this, and the way I've heard you describe it before, is a journey from being a cadet at the Air Force Academy to an Air Force officer, and then into finance and investment banking. Can you walk us through that a little bit, and then tie maybe an experience as a cadet that translated well into being an officer, that translated well into investment banking in your career today?
Okay, so my journey from cadet to officer to banking. Let's see. So the Air Force Academy, like I said, I was a management major. For the management classes, if you score the top on all the tests, you get to validate the finals. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to get the best grade on every single exam, never take a management final. So I was very competitive in that aspect. And I actually got a distinguished graduate for the management major as well. But then going into the Air Force officer life, I remember being pretty competitive as well. I wanted to win awards. I wanted to get picked up to grad school, to go to grad school full time. I wanted the Air Force to pay for me to go to grad school, right? So I applied for that, got in, got them to pay for my Master's of Science degree. Also, another part of that transition from my Air Force officer career to investment banking was, especially when I was deployed and had to do so many things that didn't really fit my job description as a finance officer. But when you're over there, you just literally just have to figure it out, just get stuff done. And like every day at my job, my current job as an investment banking associate, there's stuff that I've never seen before. I just got to figure it out, get it done, make sure the clients are happy, make sure my boss is happy. It's very similar to the military in that aspect.
I love it. I love how we teased out the fact that a mediocre cadet was also the distinguished graduate of the management program, and then was also selected for one of the most competitive AFIT scholarships that we had, and now is also in one of the most elite institutions as an investment banker. So hopefully the folks listening in, as you tease out some of that stuff for your fellow grads and the people you spend time with, what we bring to the table, and I think Everett said it nicely, is incredibly valued, whether you go into investment banking or you go into another career field. And then in this business, what we learn as cadets and what we in our experience as officers, I'd like to just maybe head this back over to JP to maybe tease out one of his experiences and how that's parlayed into his success.
An Air Force experience that's translated well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say I'll give like sort of one macro and one micro. So the macro is I did not have Ginny's competitive attitude at the academy, and I don't say that as a recommendation for anyone that's maybe still there, but more as a motivation for people that aren't. So I was a good enough cadet. My GPA started with a 3, but not much more than that. When I went into active duty and I was a pilot, I think I matured quite a bit, and I was a much better officer than I was a cadet, and that opened up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities both within the military and outside of it. So, school slots and getting choice of assignments and just recognizing that just trying to be the best that you can possibly be at whatever it is you're doing, even if it doesn't seem necessarily relevant to the next step in your journey, which is how I felt at the academy when I knew I had a pilot slot, only opens more doors and doesn't really cost that much to do in terms of effort. So,
Jake, can you remind us what did you fly on the Air Force?
A KC-10, so tankers, yep, which is a pretty cush flying job. I'll tell you that much. It was a good deal. But one of the doors that opened that actually helped me quite a bit in recruiting, both from a storytelling perspective, but also in hands-on roles in the job, is I served as what's called a presidential advance agent, which is a part-time gig for mobility pilots, so pilots of big airplanes, wherein we would be assigned to an office at the Pentagon that was responsible for the travel of Air Force One and the advanced logistics that go into that, which is really an extreme exercise in extreme attention to detail. Driving around airports, measuring light poles, timing out taxi routes, working with Secret Service, with air traffic control, police and firefighters in the area, the press, White House staff. So really being a point person between a lot of relevant parties, which I think is analogous to investment banking in a lot of ways. That was a really tangible experience that I could parlay into the interview process, but then more importantly, developed a skill set in terms of, like I said, just extreme attention to detail, which I think is probably the most important factor or the most important attribute you can have as a junior banker in this world. Like that is what you'll get criticized for. And that's sort of the baseline expectation, is that you don't make silly mistakes. And if you do, you don't make them twice and you move on from it very quickly. I think that being under the spotlight in that role is similar to the job I have now, whereas opposed to being a pilot, I felt like I was on my own most of the time and had a lot more autonomy, but also less oversight, which is great, but not as close to reality in the investment banking world. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
No, that's great. And that attention to detail, I know, is critical in just about everything we do, whether we're advance agents or pilots or finance officers. But certainly, I know as a young investment banking associate, you are judged every day on that specific point. Maybe let's take this over to Everett. Everett, let's continue that. Can you share a little anecdote or a story or some lesson learned while on active duty or at the academy that translated into what you're doing today? And then if you could expand a little bit on what that day-to-day life actually is. What are you doing? Is there Excel? Are you a PowerPoint jockey? Are you running books around New York City? What is it that you do here?
So on the active duty or cadet thing, the thing I would really want to foot stomp is all of the emphasis on character and, professionalism and character, integrity, and hearing things like officers eat last and all that kind of stuff. That stuff translates really well. So I mean, I'm sure all of us have had experiences like this, but when I go back tonight and I'm working late and there's an analyst who is working with me or, supporting whatever, the task is that I'm working on, there's just a huge credibility thing between you and the analyst. And so the analyst is going to be, typically 6, 7, 8 years younger than a new associate. And it reminds me so much of being a brand new second lieutenant. So, you're a brand new second lieutenant, you're put in some situation where there are these technical experts who are the enlisted corps that have, maybe done the job for a couple of years or decades. And in some respect, you're in charge, of them, and certainly responsible for making sure that a project is complete, or that the crew does what they're supposed to do, or whatever the case is. And so there's this balance between getting technically competent and also focusing on the leadership elements of the job. And that is, definitely the associate experience. I'm certainly expected to get up to speed from a technical standpoint, because I have to check the work of the analyst and all of that. But at the same time, there's just a high degree of technical focus that is expected of the analyst, and obviously more leadership, or the expectation that more of your time will certainly be spent on being a leader and managing projects and all that kind of stuff. So in any case, the idea of being someone that people can look up to and rely on, and do what you say you're going to do, and keep a schedule, and or be accountable, right? So like, not only for your own work, but if a senior person asks, where we're at on a particular thing, and the reason that you're not there on that task is because maybe because of something that the analyst did, you certainly wouldn't say that. You would take it on as the associate and kind of own the responsibility and be the accountable one. So anyway, all that to say, I thought about like the officers eat last thing, because at least in my experience, I find one really small day-to-day example of that is deciding, whether to to go to bed before your analyst if you're working on like something really closely together. And I find that that's like like one of those really small things where okay, you could go to bed earlier, and or you could eat first, and maybe you have the authority to, or whatever, but there's just this like interesting dynamic between you and the folks that are looking to see how you carry yourself and that sort of. So all of that, like the character, the leadership, and the hyper focus on the professionalism and all that, I find that it's very prevalent. And honestly, for me, one of the more attractive things about the role, because I don't think that's while I think responsibility and all that stuff is important, I'm sure in most career fields and stuff, I just think that the nature of like being a professional, and there being something about the job, the title, and all, that there is a persona that surrounds it. Like, I think that as in the military, like you wear your uniform when you go to a grocery store, like you're representing, the Air Force. I find that there is an element of that in investment banking, and you kind of, there's a sense in which you're on call, and you kind of, are representing the firm in more than just the work that you do. So that's a little bit of, I guess the only thing I'll add on, just on the day-to-day stuff, there is a lot of Excel and PowerPoint. I'm sure that 95% of the next 6 hours of my night, will be spent in either PowerPoint or Excel, or maybe in, I guess, an Outlook, writing emails and stuff. And I guess maybe to go a little bit further on that. So you do a lot of financial modeling. So, things like if company A buys company B, if Amazon buys Whole Foods, what is Amazon going to look like after the fact? Is it going to help Amazon shareholders? Is it going to improve Amazon's, stock price? Answering at the end of the day, say Jeff Bezos is asking Goldman Sachs, to weigh in on that question. Like, hey, if I buy Whole Foods, what impact is that going to have on my stock price? Are my shareholders going to be happy about this decision? And then so Goldman Sachs says, okay, we'll help you answer that question. And then that but it's a senior person that says, sure, we'll help you answer that question tomorrow morning. And so then that request, just kind of trickles on down. And so, the senior person that offered, to answer that question, then task, like, say, the VP to help answer the question. And the VP maybe helps kind of give some color to what that task should really look like. And then ultimately, generally, and this is somewhat of an exaggeration, but at midnight, it's an associate and an analyst in Excel trying to actually come up with an answer and then give it to the VP, and the VP, now who has more experience says this makes sense or looks right or doesn't. And then maybe they'll meet, and then eventually it'll go up to the MD, and then that whole team or just the MD will end up answering that question. So that's like a day-to-day thing that, it's not necessarily like the day that they buy Whole Foods, but throughout that whole experience, that's the kind of day-to-day thing that an investment banker is trying to help do or, solve.
Absolutely. And the importance of those relationships. When we hear about Goldman Sachs, folks should take away Goldman Sachs is Everett, right? JP Morgan is JP Joyce. Bank of America is Ginny. When we hear about these big companies, Amazon is not just Amazon, it's Jeff Bezos looking for advice, and being able to provide that advice at the highest level is why, again, I think grads and Air Force Academy alumni perform so well, because the relationships we build are so genuine, and the analytical rigor that we bring to every question and answer is recognized, and the ability of, whether you're coming from philosophy or, even I was a geography major, analytics, we do. As we start, we're clearly all excited about this. Maybe head off to, we'll do it in rapid succession. My advice to a lot of folks was I stayed in the reserves and was able to manage that tension between two career paths and ultimately retired. But that's not for everybody. Maybe if we can hit JP, what's one piece of advice you'd leave the next generation with in order, if they want to evaluate, moving into this career field? JP, I think you might be on mute.
Thank you. Man, I almost made it all the way through without doing that. Okay. So I would say the most actionable piece of advice I can give, which I see some of you already doing, is send us, or at least me, I won't speak for everyone, but I imagine everyone, send us LinkedIn requests, reach out to us, start reaching out to anyone you can think of that, can help you along this path. I will say that, Everett coming from Penn and, Bobby from Harvard and Ginny and I having the networks from our schools, you might think that's more powerful because there's more representation from those schools in this industry. But the fact that your network is more pointed and there's fewer people, I actually think is a strength. I'm much more likely to respond to someone that's reaching out from an Air Force background, like basically 100% likely to respond, than I am from my MBA program, because I just get inundated with them. So we're obviously not going to be able to teach everything that you probably want to know in 45 or 50 minutes, but you'll be shocked at the level of help and support that the people in your network are willing to give. So don't be shy. Reach out and start building those connections now.
I love it. I like to say that the end of the long blue line extends well beyond the end of the terrazzo and the end of a runway, and that's great to hear, because when I made this transition, JP, there were fewer and farther between, and so that's great to hear. Ginny, how about you? What's maybe one or two things you'd like to leave with folks?
I'd say if you're a cadet watching or a junior officer watching, you're interested in doing investment banking after you serve in the military, the biggest thing you should focus on right now is having the most successful 5-year active duty career or 7-year active duty career that you can have. You want to rack up as many awards that you could get. You want to show all the banks, all the top business schools, whatever you want to do, that you are the best. If you're specifically thinking about going from the path that I did, straight from the Air Force to a veterans internship program at one of the big bulge bracket banks in New York City, you have to know that you're competing against Naval Academy grads that are SEALs. They've seen real combat. Some of them have Harvard MBAs that they got straight out of the Naval Academy. You're competing against West Point guys. You're competing against fighter pilots, Top Gun pilots, all those people. You have to be better than them, and you have to put yourself in a position by being the best officer that you could be, really. I think the same goes if you're applying to like business school as well, or any high high level job outside of the Air Force. And then another big thing is start reaching out to Air Force Academy grads that work in banking, like myself, JP, Everett, Bobby. Reach out to West Point grads, reach out to Naval Academy grads, just hear their story, try to find them on LinkedIn. That's what I did. I started 3 years before I got out of the Air Force. I started transitioning. I think Bobby actually slid into my DMs on LinkedIn because he saw my profile, which was pretty funny. And then, so like I literally talked to any old Academy grad that I could find, any junior officer that just got out and got a banking job that I could find, any West Point grad that would respond to me over LinkedIn, pick their brains, talk to them 3 years in advance, kept the conversation rolling, did coffee chats throughout Los Angeles, flew to Colorado, did a coffee chat with one of Bobby's classmates who actually let me intern with him for 6 months in Denver at a middle market investment bank. Flew out to New York City, did coffee chats with people at Bank of America and various banks out here, flew home with an offer on the spot. The biggest thing you could do is network, put yourself out there.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, I think your profile said transitioning officer looking for investment banking. So you're right. And JP mentioned, there's an entire generation out here that's excited to reach back and help the next Air Force Academy grad find their path into investment banking. And this, I think, WebEx here is a great example of all of us coming together. Let's try to, Everett, if we could, we'll have you kind of round this out.
So, I mean, on the note of advice or, a reflection, I think to me, the two things I would want to foot stomp is, like Jenny's been saying, definitely like excellence, excel. I mean, that's important, but I think has certainly been touched on. The other big thing that I would really, and I think the two go hand in hand. Like, I think it's natural that you would excel in this respect. But what I would foot stomp is enjoy the experience. Enjoy your time at the Air Force Academy. Enjoy the time that you're on active duty. If I think that a lot of my peers, like people who, because if you're someone who you want to get out at the end of your commitment, I feel like you kind of find somehow you end up finding all the other folks that are secretly thinking the same thing or whatever, and you start sharing resources and trying to balance like, okay, I want to do well in the Air Force and I don't want everyone necessarily thinking that I want to get out tomorrow, but at the same time, like I do want to start preparing, and so there's a little bit of synergy and a natural affinity for the other folks who you realize are thinking the same thing. But my point being, I feel like one of the things that I think a lot of folks that I felt a lot of folks got wrong, that I related to in that regard, like people I knew that were going to get out soon, is I felt like there was a tendency not to appreciate or enjoy the present, like the experience that we were having at that time. Either, maybe because of just being too focused on the fact that, you'd be getting out soon, or, and I think it's more the latter. I think the idea of being like this internal or maybe external conflict that you can't both want to get out at the end of your commitment and thoroughly be enjoying what you're doing. And that's the thing that's the notion that I would want to challenge, is, recognize that if you want to get out in 5 years or 7 years, or maybe it's longer, but you are thinking about getting out, like there's nothing wrong with getting out or planning for the time when you're going to get out and owning, fully enjoying, and fully excelling in the experience that you're having at the moment. And I say all of that to say now, when I'm sitting at Goldman or meeting with a client or in an interview or in any of those experiences, there's one period of my life that people tend to be most excited to hear about or interested in. And it's the time spent on active duty, or maybe a deployment, or my time at the academy. I rarely get asked about my time at Wharton, and I rarely get asked, about, the period of my life people are most interested in is the time, that I spent in the Air Force. And I think it would suck if every time that happened, I'm reflecting on some experience that, wasn't meaningful or enjoyable. And so I think I consider it a huge privilege now to be able to reflect on, a wonderful active duty experience and a really great, Air Force Academy experience. I find it's something I'm very proud of. And I think that people are very attracted to that thing that we all, share. So that would be my thing. Enjoy it. And hopefully by enjoying it, you'll excel and just don't see any of that as conflicting with doing all the stuff that you've heard today, in terms of hopefully, planning for a successful, career in investment banking or, whatever. So definitely reach out to us and get help.
Absolutely. Listen, I couldn't agree more. In the end, I think we're all honored to go to the Air Force Academy, ultimately to build leaders for America, and not just during our time in uniform. So make the most of that time. You only get to do it once for all intents and purposes. Maybe there's a couple folks that have tried it twice, but for the most of us, you get one shot. Put everything into it. And in the end, know that at some point, everybody gets off of active duty. At some point, everybody, ultimately retires or moves on. And so I would only ask for, the grads that are in leadership positions, when folks approach them and say, hey, it's my time, to be supportive and continue to build that long blue line that we know at any given time we can reach out to others and get that extra help. I would lead it on just one last anecdote, in that you don't have to have perfect grades. You don't have to be the perfect cadet, but use your time effectively and figure out who it is you do want to be. If your grades aren't perfect, that's fine. You had a lot of things going on at the academy. But if you want to be an investment banker, you've got to do the work to get there. You've got to show up and tell people that you've earned it and you've put yourself in that position. For myself, that meant while on active duty, I went out and got another master's degree. So when I applied to a top tier MBA program, that they saw that, while I was in school, I was a Division I athlete. I was part of the squadron. I was active as I could be. While on active duty, I performed is to the top of my ability, and I won all the awards and the ribbons and everything we've all talked about. And then not only that, but I also went off and got a master's degree and, had that 4.0 to look good for the next level, which is that application to a top tier MBA program, which then translates to the opportunity to, for all intents and purposes, the folks around this table, you're getting a chance to play with, you name it, your favorite baseball team, right? You're going to the Super Bowl if you're into football, or you name it. This is what it's all about. This is the best of the best in this particular career path. And I'm excited to be surrounded by other folks like this out in the ecosystem. So with that, I think really it's incumbent upon myself to say thank you all. Thanks everybody for joining this and attending our virtual panel and an introduction into investment banking and finance. Thanks to the panelists for sharing your time. And I know folks are going to turn right around and get back to work. And so carving out an extra hour to do something like this to support the Air Force Academy, the Association of Graduates and Air Force Academy Foundation is truly appreciated as we all look to give back to the Air Force Academy. Ultimately, I think this concludes this virtual event, and we wish everybody a good evening.